Like Ryan Holiday says, ego is the enemy, and I think he's exactly right. What we're trying to teach ourselves when we're trying to go from being unable to do it to being able to do it, what we're trying to teach ourselves is to
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 100 of Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen. I'm super excited about this one. It's been in the making for over a year. I have worked this lead and I want it to be a testament to what it means to be consistent, focused, and dedicated despite a whole bunch of reasons not to be. There were so many times I wanted to quit in this process, whether it's not enough listens or views, the guests saying no, questions by my friends and family as to why this is necessary. At the end of the day, the things that matter to you, you prioritize. And I was fortunate to have an angel in my life, my wife, who believed in me and pushed me to continue this project, especially when I was doubting myself the most. And as a result, we're at 100 episodes and counting. So, all that being said, I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Mr. Stevn Pressfield. Stevn Pressfield is the author of many books, not limited to, but including The Legend of Bagger Vance, my personal favorite, The War of Art, and he's also publishing a book that will be released in December, The Daily Pressfield. I've read a few of his works, and now I've had the opportunity to sit down with this author who has sold millions and millions of copies of his books. This particular conversation was unique in that he actually took a moment to acknowledge the quality of my questions, which I'm not sure I've ever heard him do in an interview before. That's not a testament to me personally. That's more a testament to what it means to be consistent with something, to follow your curiosity, and to challenge beliefs, even if it makes someone think. So, all that being said, I'm grateful for Mr. Pressfield's time. He is a legend in and of himself, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this interview will lead in the future. And even if this is the pinnacle of this podcast, it really has been just the coolest experience with all of you. 100 episodes over the last couple of years. I can't believe it. I'm looking to continue to level up the game, continue to bring you premier guests, asking great questions and challenging the limit of what I can bring to the table so you can continue to be curious and be a sponge and learn and never just take what anyone says as the ultimate truth, but constantly seeking your own. So, here we go. Please welcome my guest, Mr. Stevn Pressfield. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and this is Inside the Inspired. Resistance comes in many shapes and forms and sizes, and this individual is someone who defined them all. This is someone who set the standard for what it means to identify challenges in our way and then set out on a mission to help others find a way through theirs. An author, a podcaster, and just a genuine overall kind human being, someone who's educating my generation and paying all of his lessons forward. This is the interview I've been looking forward to since I started this show and will premiere at episode 100. And I'm super grateful for the time, energy, and focus. Please welcome none other than Mr. Stevn Pressfield. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Jonathan. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. By the way, I'm not a podcaster, actually. I'm guests on various podcasts, but I don't have one of my own.
I think when you have the type of ever looming presence in the space like you do, you can almost be qualified as a podcaster. But yes,
Okay,
I'll take
I'll
that.
accept that. All right. Thanks for the very kind words.
Well deserved and well earned, as I'm sure you know. I know that a lot of your interviews and your content tend to start around this concept of resistance, and obviously we'll touch on that. I want to take things in a bit of a different way, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's great.
So, something that stood out for me at the outset of just coming across your work is the concept of rationalization. And I understand it as a form of resistance. But what stood out to me is that in in the war of art, you talk about rationalization, and you quote this episode from 40 Rock, I believe, or 30
Mhm.
Rock, where you're talking about rationalization is better than sex.
Ah,
You tried
it's the big chill, actually. Yeah.
oh, the big chill, pardon me.
Yeah.
So rationalization is better than sex. And I believe the second character goes, no, it's not. You ever try to go a week without sex? You ever try to go a week without rationalization? How did you start thinking about rationalization in this way as a form of resistance?
I mean, it's sort of what we all do. It's kind of like the first go-to um, thing that we all do in our heads, like when we crap out on ourselves and don't sit down and do our work that particular day or whatever it is, we immediately rationalize it. We make excuses to ourselves and we say, well, today my car's engine exploded. I have to take care of that or whatever. Um, and of course, I do it all the time. Um, so I always say that rationalization is like resistance's right hand man because it sort of goes together with it. As soon as we do something that we know isn't right for ourselves or right for our calling, we got to come up with a reason otherwise we feel shame and we don't want to feel shame. So we try to say, well, here's why. And it's always a hollow reason, and we always know it.
What's also unique about your journey is that you started out as this individual who was doing all these different types of jobs, and you put yourself in a position to really, in my own words, be at the bottom, rock bottom. And I found that through that lens that you provide and prescribe throughout your work, that there's a lot of insight that you provide from having been at the bottom as a writer, as an individual seeking and finding purpose. What was the catalyst? What was the moment that you realized that you had insights to offer the rest of the world, that people could
Ah,
start to benefit from what you had
oh,
to
okay.
say?
Kind of the reason I wrote The War of Art was that um, being a working writer, you always have friends that come to you and they say, I've got a book in me. I know I've got to write it. Can you help? I don't know how to start. So I would sit up with various friends in person, till like 2 in the morning and trying to sort of psych them up to go ahead and tackle whatever project it was they want to do. And the one thing I found myself explaining to them was the concept of resistance, the idea that they were going to have to overcome their own tendency to procrastinate and so on and so forth. And so I did this, I don't know, maybe 10 times. And of course, nobody ever listened to me and nobody ever wrote their book. So finally, I just said, let me just put this down on paper. And the next time somebody comes to me, I'll just say, here, read this. So that was the impetus for why for putting it all down on paper.
And I know that there was a moment in your career where you had written a book and just started from scratch completely. That can be a pretty big hit to the ego. How were you able to manage your ego in realizing, like, hey, I got to start over and that's okay?
I think that uh, that is definitely a skill, a mental skill or a mental, I don't know, strength or something that nobody teaches you. You don't learn that in school. It has to happen in your real life. And I think for me, I had failed so many times and had so much shame for myself that I couldn't get it together that I was just so driven to get to the end of this tunnel, of being unable to write, unable to finish anything, unable to really do it, that I just thought I just have no choice. The alternative is, losing my mind or something like that. I was just scared straight by the alternative to not finishing. So I just had to, just find the resources somewhere in me and just keep going. But I think for most writers, and I would bet most creative people, that moment is going to come on a lot of projects. that moment when you got to scrap everything and go back to square one. And that's sort of when you separate the amateurs from the pros, and it's a real test. It's a real test. And a lot of people, for whatever reasons, they can rationalize it or whatever, or it's just too much for them. They don't do that. And then they fail to do what they were meant to do. They kind of become casualties of the war of art.
Amateurs versus pros. The author of tens of books at this point, you wrote one of your pieces of work, Turning Pro, similar themes and tones to Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be in the War of Art. There's one notion in, I believe it's Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, where you talk about how it's important to be where the action's happening, be where the profession that you're seeking to be a part of is actually getting after it. How did you come to that conclusion?
I guess in my life, for me, there was a certain point where I decided that I was going to try to write for the movies. I was going to try to be a screenwriter. And it never occurred to me not to come to Los Angeles. I just knew I had to move there. And it was exactly the right thing to do, because for a million reasons, the resources were there. It was the kind of a world where a movie studio might call you up, Paramount or Fox or something, and say, "Can you be in a meeting tomorrow morning at 8:00?" And you just have to be there. But at the same time, there's also the world of other aspiring screenwriters, other young writers that are learning the craft and going through all of the, the initiatory processes that you have to do. And when you make friends with them, you learn from them, when you meet people and you meet mentors. Like, for instance, I had an agent, a really good agent named Mike Werner. And at one point after, this is in I Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be. At one point after, I don't know, maybe 5 years or 4 years of writing scripts and having none of them bought, he said to me, "What if I were to team you up with an older writer, an older established writer that can get work and is getting work, and you'd have to work your ass off, you'd be the slave but you'll get work." So if I hadn't been there, and that made all the difference. All of a sudden I started working and I learned a lot of stuff, and I had a real mentor. So if you weren't there, where your heart wants to be physically, that could never have happened. If I had stayed in New York or whatever. And I think it's true. Like, another example I talk about is, if you want to be a ballet dancer, you pretty much, there's certain places you have to be. You can take classes in smaller cities, but it's no substitute for being in New York or London, where you have the big ballet companies and where you can, again, make friends and all that sort of thing, and acquire teachers and mentors. So, but then again, also on a metaphorical level, you've got to be, your heart and your body has got to be in a place where your dream can come true. To stay, even though theoretically you can do it by Zoom, it's not the same. Another point I make, I'm rambling here, Jonathan, but maybe you can cut whatever you don't like. When your physical body, like for me in the movie business, when your physical body is in the city where it's done, then the people that you meet, the people that might hire you, the people that you're going on interviews with, they see you there and they know this person has committed. They've left some other city, they've come here, they really care, whereas if somebody else is trying to send in a screenplay from Indiana, people say, well, they're not serious. Why aren't they here? Because all the people that you have to deal with in terms of who might hire you, they're here. They came to LA or wherever the city is. And so they ask, if you're not there, it's like, why aren't you here? If you really want to do this. So anyway, that's part of why I think you got to be there.
I think one of the interesting aspects about a lot of the themes in your work is that there's an element of passion and heart and purpose and presence in everything that you that I've read, that you've written about, among many other things. I'm curious, are you familiar with Viktor Frankl's work at all?
Oh yeah.
In terms of thinking about a will to meaning, finding meaning in suffering, how, if at all, has that concept played a role in your work?
That's a great question. Um, I think that we never really, well, people, you could say to somebody, write from the heart, or produce from the heart, dance from the heart, sing from the heart. But you can't just do that right away, because there's your ego is in the way. I think, particularly when you're young, right? And it's natural. You're self-conscious, you want so much to succeed. You find yourself asking a question, what does the audience want? What do people want? Let me give that to them. And it's only after you sort of get beaten down again and again and again, and you finally you come you ask yourself the question, you have to answer the question, why am I doing this? It's like I would ask myself, is it for money? Because I'm certainly not making any money. Is it because I want recognition? I'm certainly not having any recognition. My family thinks I'm crazy. Why am I doing this? And in the end, the answer you finally come to, if you're going to really do it, is that you don't have a choice. It's like you're driven from it. There's a voice inside you, or I always like to refer to it as an underground river that's flowing inside you. And you have to do it, even if you're going to fail and fail and fail. You just say to yourself, I'm a writer. I don't give a shit if I'm never published ever. I'm going to keep writing. And I think a lot of people really come to that, it's a dark moment, because you say, I don't see any real hope at the end of this thing. I'm never going to find a publisher or something. But that's the point when you do start writing from your heart, whether you realize it or not. And it's not an intellectual process. I think it happens on some deep level, on the level of the unconscious, or I don't know what. I believe that in the gods, the gods kind of tap you on the shoulder. The muse kind of says, okay, I'm finally going to help you, and then you do start writing in that Viktor Frankl way of, absolutely from that inner person that is only you. And at least that was how it worked for me.
You talk about the muse quite often. And in addition, there's also this aspect of the voice in your head, like you talked about. How can people befriend the voice in their head and recognize that it's trying to keep them safe, and maybe that's not the best for them to keep themselves safe? How do
You
we?
mean the good voice in your head, Jonathan, or the
Yes,
voice of resistance in your head?
I think I want to say, the way I'm thinking about it, it's the voice of resistance. How can we befriend the voice of resistance to leverage it to help us accomplish greater and greater things?
I'm not in my experience, you can't befriend it. It's the devil, it's 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 a force of nature, like gravity or anything else, and it can't be reasoned with. It's the ultimate sort of villain. And the only way uh, to deal with it is to dismiss it, to recognize, is to overcome it one way or another, either through pure bull rushing, aggressiveness, or through a sort of a jujitsu way of just sort of letting it take its shot at you and go sailing out the window. I'm kind of a believer in just kind of dismissing it. And by that, I mean, just sit down and just start to work. And, in other words, put your ass where your heart wants to be. Put your ass in front of this thing here and start banging on it. And once you do that, it'll go away. But I've never been able. Some people have told me, oh, I've befriended it. I give it a human face resistance, and I'll tell it, here, have a bowl of dog food, or here, have a drink, and leave me alone. But that's never worked for me. Maybe it works for somebody else, but not for me.
In your career and your experience, you've become somewhat of a role model not somewhat, a role model and a father to a lot of authors out there, Ryan Holiday, and the list goes on. What, if anything, does that mean to you
What does it mean to me? Um, it's
to play
interesting
this
because
type of role?
it's not like particularly emotionally satisfying for me. I never set out to with this as any kind of goal. It's sort of the little by little, month by month, year by year. It's sort of as I get older, it sort of has started to happen, and um, uh, when I wrote The War of Art, I really wrote it for myself. I really wrote it to sort of clarify my own thinking, to put things down on paper and just see what I really believed. Because I really do find that writing is does work that way. You sit down not knowing what you think, you write, for 9 months, and you do know now at the end what you think. You go, oh, I didn't realize I thought that. So it's been sort of a surprise to me. I'm happy to help when I can. Uh, but it certainly wasn't anything that I set out to accomplish or anything.
So now when you're confronted or questioned all of these about your insights and your wisdom, how do you know if you're offering the right advice? How can someone put themselves in a position to understand themselves and say, I hope I'm offering the best possible advice that I can to this individual in this particular situation for their contextual circumstances?
I'm not, if I understand your question, I'm not sure how somebody does that. All I can do is I have sort of certain um, insights that I've come to, and a lot of other people have come to those same insights, and I'm happy to share them for whatever they're worth. Somebody may say, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me. That's bullshit. I don't care about that." But for those people that it is helpful, and they go, "Oh, that makes sense to me," um, I'm happy to do that, and it is kind of fun to do that. Um, but again, I'm really kind of talking to myself and trying to clarify my own ideas.
Procrastination is another element of resistance.
Yeah.
What, if any, hack mindset have you found works for you in being able to overcome procrastination?
There's no sort of, I don't think, Jonathan, there's any trick or hack to it. It's just a matter of doing it. Um, you just, you just have to physically sit down wherever you are in front of an easel, in front of it on a piano keyboard or whatever, and just do it. Just make yourself do it. To me, it's sort of like jumping into a cold pool. You can stand on there, or a cold plunge or something. You can stand on the edge forever, but there's only one way to do it, and that's just hold your nose and jump in. Um, the good news of all of these things is that once you do jump in, it's okay. It's only that first horrible, scared moment that's so bad. But once you're actually in it, it's okay.
The ego is a very tricky, fickle thing that tends to get in our way. Are there any particular perspectives or insights that you can offer in how you've managed yours in being able to write endless classics?
First of all, let me say one thing, Jonathan. These questions you're asking are really good questions. I can tell that you've thought about it, and I commend you for that. It's great.
Thank
Um,
you very much.
what I do think is, like Ryan Holiday says, ego is the enemy, and I think he's exactly right. That really what we're what we're trying to teach ourselves as artists or aspiring artists, when we're trying to go from being unable to do it to being able to do it, what we're trying to teach ourselves is to.
This episode is brought to you by Slate Milk. Slate Milk is a protein chocolate drink that gives you all the necessary energy after you have finished a hard training session, or also serves as an awesome snack, whether it's hot or cold. I commute 2 hours a day to my job, and every single day after I train, I'm looking for a quick snack or post workout drink that I don't have to spend time making. So I go into my fridge, I take out my slate, and I hit the road as fast as I can and enjoy my drink on the way to work. That's the way that I personally like to enjoy it, because there's so many different flavors. So in the morning, the mocha flavor with the caffeine definitely hits. I can also recommend you check out their other flavors. It is a phenomenal brand. They are the #1 partner of the UFC. You can actually go to their website, 𝘠𝘩𝘦 type in the code INSPIRED for 10% off your first order. So go ahead, type in the code INSPIRED at 𝘠𝘩𝘦 to get 10% off your first order today. This episode is brought to you by ProMix. ProMix is an energy supplement brand that provides a whole plethora of different products, from protein cereal bars to protein shakes, probiotic, prebiotic, deep bloat products, along with electrolytes, and the list goes on. ProMix is the supplement that I go to for all of my health needs. It has been a game changer for me over the last few months. After the 1,000 pull-up challenge, my immune system was compromised in ways that were super uncomfortable. I kept getting sick, and I knew I needed to level up my game. I didn't place enough value on supplements, but I do now. I spent some time, I did my research, and ProMix is the brand that I decided to work with because my immune system is finally in check. So go check out promix.com and type in the code inside the inspired to get 20% off your first order today. That's right. Go to promix.com to get 20% off your first order today with the code inside the inspired.
Is to get out of our own way, to get the ego out of the way, and to get to the higher area, the what I would call the self, the Jungian self with a capital S. But I don't think there's really any, for me, realistically, it probably took me like 30 years of basically beating my head into the wall as a writer and looking at the shit I put on the page, even if some of it was pretty good, and just saying, this isn't it. This is not it. It's not what I'm looking for, you know? And finally, sort of, there's this kind of a, are you familiar with a book called Zen and the Art of Archery?
No, the
Ah,
motorcycle one I know, not archery.
that was a ripoff of the original. So I'll
Okay,
tell you this. I'll tell you the story here for whatever
please.
this is worth. Zen and the Art of Archery was written by a young German philosopher, a guy named 𝘍𝘓𝘕 𝘓𝘕. I highly recommend it. It's a great short book. And he was studying Zen and he couldn't get it, you know? And so he became, he signed up for a course in Japan with a master archer. And the whole, thing was using archery as a way to kind of get to that mindset, that Zen mindset. And the way it turned out, that the big challenge for him was the moment of letting go of the arrow. And what his teacher would say to him, you're letting it go too soon. You're trying to force it. He said the arrow should go all by itself, you know? And so 𝘍𝘓𝘕 𝘓𝘕 found he would either hang on too long or he would let go too soon. But the bottom line of it was his ego. He was trying to control the thing, you know? And that is sort of the way Zen masters apparently teach Zen, is they make you beat your head into the wall. They give you an assignment that's impossible to be solved by the ego. And they make so you fail again and again and again until you kind of give up. And that's sort of what happened with Mr. 𝘓𝘓𝘕. He finally just sort of gave up, and sure enough, the arrow finally let go on its own, you know? And I think that writing or any form of art is kind of the same way. Your ego is trying so hard to control it. You want to succeed, you want to get recognition, you want to sound like Hemingway, all those things that can't be done, and finally you just give up and you sort of say to yourself, let me write in my own voice or in some crazy voice that's coming to me out of the ether. I'll write, about some world on another planet, or I'll write about the year 40 million BC, whatever. Or I'll write something that is so unconventional, people are going to hate it. It's too violent, it's too sexy, it's too stupid, but it's coming out of me the way I want it to come out. And at that point, I think you do get past the ego. And speaking of the muse and the other areas of, that's when the muse starts talking to you, when your ego has gone away. But for me, there was no way to do it except to beat my head in the wall for 30 years. I couldn't just hit a switch and make it happen.
I think that's what's so insightful about it, right? It's so simple yet so dense. Just let go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, how do you
Yeah.
learn? It's like you just finally are like, whatever, like screw it, I got nothing to lose anyway, I've tried everything, the only thing that's left is to simply let go. And I find that when it comes to any type of work, when it comes to training, yesterday I ran the New York City Marathon. It's so funny, every single time I do some intense challenge, I always find myself writing to you. And so
Hey, congratulations to you on running the marathon. God bless you.
Thank you. And well, part of that's resistance, right? Understanding and identifying. The purpose in doing these challenges is to recognize like where my body wants to give up, my mind can keep going, or vice versa, where my mind is like, we've had enough, my body's like, we actually got a bit more. And resistance is funny in that way, right? Where either way, I'm letting go. Either my mind is letting go of what my body has to say, or my body's letting go of what my mind has to say. And I think in getting to that point, it's been a lot of iteration. And so when it comes to I think the question I want to ask is, when it comes to the creative process, I understand the metaphor of letting go. How has it worked for you?
I'll give you an example for whatever this is worth. The third novel that I tried to write, none of them succeeded. None of them found even a publisher. They were just left on the shelf, I sort of, I finished that, and it was another kind of failure, where I would show it to my friends and even they hated it, and I did have an agent and he couldn't sell it. And I was really at my wit's end, because I thought, I think I don't know how old I was, 34, 35, something like that. And I thought, I just don't have it in me to do another 4-year thing of saving money, writing, blah, blah. I just can't do it again. And so I sort of, out of desperation, I said, well, let me go to Hollywood. Let me try to write a screenplay. I've failed as a novelist. Let me fail as a screenwriter. And so I just sort of, I went down and I bought a book, How to Write a Screenplay. And I was in New York, it's like you are now. And I sat down and I wrote a story, a prison story. And this was coming out of nowhere from me. Completely, I've never been to prison. I have no idea what prison is like. I just thought, let me just pull this out of my ass, And to my amazement, everything started to flow. And I sort of learned a lesson there that was how I learned to kind of let it go, go in an area I've never been in before, just make it all up, and it worked. At least in terms of getting an agent. I didn't ever make them.
When you look at where we are now in the world, and there's all this technological advancement, whether it's language models or deep fakes or anything artificial intelligence related, you have the writer's strike going on, all these different aspects. In a context that you're comfortable answering, what's your take on artificial intelligence and its role in creative writing, if anything?
I may be wrong, and new technologies come along. Television came along, the internet came along. But as my understanding at the moment is, I think artificial intelligence is the devil. And I'm sure there are uses for it, but any kind of writing or art that's really worth anything comes from the soul. It comes from that level, from another level of reality. It doesn't come from the intellect. It doesn't come from anything that's rational. And until, Did you see the latest, the Blade Runner movie with Ryan Gosling, Blade Runner 2049 or something?
No, but I heard I need to.
I mean, the gist of the story was, do replicants have a soul? Right. And in the movie, the point they made was, yeah, they do have a soul. But so if AI somehow has a soul, then I won't call it the devil. But I think right now it's just it's a tool, and it's a tricky tool because it can fool you. You know, it's it's a it's a pretend version of what we're hoping to get. So I'm I know I should learn about it, but I've stayed away from it as far as I can.
I feel like an individual like yourself doesn't need to. There's so much depth of thought and authenticity in your portfolio of work that I find. And obviously, I mean, the record sales, the countless interviews, the concept in and of itself has been introduced in so many different formats that it'd be disingenuous and almost like fatal if we didn't have that level of awareness around the concept of resistance and the way that you portrayed it. You've really been like a father in that regard of that particular space, especially on this particular topic. And I would never pigeonhole you into that, but I'm just saying. So when when we look at the future of writing, how can we avoid falling for this trap of relying on all these tools and still finding that intrinsic motivation to go and make best friends with the muse?
I mean, I think on the individual level, we, at least as I understand it, we just have to resist using it, like you would resist using cocaine. You know, on the macro level, in terms of an audience, readers or anybody that is into any kind of art, I think they are going to reject this stuff because, you know, you can tell when something is fake and when it doesn't have come from a depth, when it doesn't have soul. So I think it's not going to work. I don't think people are going to start generating books by AI and they're going to find an audience. Um, I certainly hope not. So I think that any writer or artist that's trying to use that as a trick or a hack is going to realize it's a dead end, and they're going to have to be thrown back under the hard work of finding out who they really are and what their own voice really is. That's my hope anyway. I hope it doesn't become a thing, AI.
That whole idea of discovering that inner you purpose is very important. And we kind of touched on Viktor Frankl's work briefly. I'm curious from your perspective, do you have a litmus test or an opinion on how people can discover their purpose? How do they know what their purpose is?
Mm, that's a great question. I'm not sure I know what the answer to that is. I think that, just speaking from my own experience, there was a point where my writing suddenly changed, and um, and I could tell that it was coming from a place that I'd never been before, even though I couldn't control it, and there was no intellectual aspect to it. It was all on another level, on the unconscious level. Um, and then if somebody had said to me before, "Are you writing from your real calling and your real purpose?" I would have, I might have tried to convince myself that it was true, but it wasn't. But after that point, I did say, yeah, I am writing that way. And the interesting thing is that each book that kind of came out, like the first one was The Legend of Bagger Vance, the second one was Gates of Fire, um, surprised me. And it wasn't like I thought, this is my voice. I'm really writing from my voice. It was sort of like, where did this voice come from? Who is this? But let me trust it. And then when it was done, the book was done, I could look at it and say, well, I didn't think that was me or my voice, but it must be, because there it is and it's really working. So it's a really mysterious thing. You ask, what is soul or something? It's not it's not what you think it is. It's always kind of surprises you. It's coming from another level. And people, it's a commonplace thing to say that you, the writer or the artist, are kind of a conduit for a voice that's coming from the muse or from another level. But it's true. Um, you really are a conduit, and that voice does surprise you. And the voice changes, in my experience, from one work to the next. It's not the same, and yet it's real. It's a really crazy paradox and mystery.
Are you familiar with Stephen Coller's work?
No, I'm not.
So he wrote this book, he's written a few books. One of them is called The Art of Impossible. I'm sure you're familiar with flow state. It kind of aligns with what, in my view, we're talking about here, where one of the exercises that he offers in order to help establish purpose is write out 25 things that you're interested in, topics that if you had a spare weekend, you would go and explore a bit further. And then look at the intersections of those particular topics to see where the overlap is. And you could start to parse out what you're interested in. Say it's, you know, you like bugs and you are a fan of the NFL and you're looking to
Uh-huh.
improve performance. Maybe bugs could be a form of protein to help you improve
Uh-huh.
performance so you can play football better.
Uh-huh.
And that's your niche, that's your purpose. So then he starts to outline in his work all these different ways you can get into flow state. And it kind of aligns with your approach of, resistance and procrastination as a form of resistance, how we can overcome it. Are you a I'll just try to outlay it as, normalize these words as best as I can. Are you a believer in this concept of like the science evidence based approach to creative writing, as in like getting
No,
into, okay.
no, I'm not. Uh, it may work.
Mhm.
Probably it does for some people, or that wouldn't be a book that people like. Um, it's too conscious. It's too coming from the intelligence, from the conventional, in my opinion. And to me, the breakthrough happens on a soul level, not on the intellectual level. Or I don't think we can. And that's why when I say things, works that really work, that come out of you, surprise you, um, because they're coming from some other place. It's like the goddess knows, and you and I don't. And a lot of what we have to learn is to trust that you know impulse that seems crazy, a topic that seems is never going to be commercial, you don't know anything about, you're not going to be good at it, but somehow you're sort of driven to do it even though you don't know why. I don't know, it becomes down to some kind of a mystery that the best we can do is trust it and put ourselves at the service of it. I'm I don't I don't there's no hack that I can see.
I love that because I think it keeps the integrity and the authenticity in the work, where we're not outsourcing it to science or evidence based studies or AI. It really, like you said, on soul level, we're able to identify and extract what the creative process actually has to offer. And I love the way you put it. It surprises us. That's how we know how genuine and real it is. I'm really infatuated with this idea of becoming the best version of yourself. It's something
Mhm.
we talk a lot about on this show, why someone like yourself is a premier guest. And the resources that I have personally used in helping me achieve what I aim to be, this best version of myself. I don't know if I see it as this penultimate I've arrived type of perspective,
Uh-huh.
but love to get your feedback. Is there such a thing as this penultimate version of who the best versions of ourselves really are?
It's another great question. I mean, the only area that I can sort of speak to that in is for myself is just in writing, because the rest of my life is, as messed up as anybody else's is. I'm not the ultimate version of myself in any sense in any of those things, but I do think that it is possible to find your calling and find your voice, at least in 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 one creative area, and follow that. Um, and I don't think it has any real overlap to other areas either. I don't think it makes you a better husband or a better father or anything like that, um, except as maybe an example to other people. But yeah, I find that I'm so fallible in so many areas that I'm not really trying to be an ultimate version of myself in any way. I'm just trying to follow my calling and write what the goddess wants me to write.
I think a big reason why I'm asking you in particular of all these questions, like many other young men who you've interacted with and worked with, are mutual friends, Nick Hutchinson, Jimmy Grant, other individuals like
Uh-huh.
Aubrey Marcus and the like, is because there's a wisdom and a sageness, if that's even a word, that comes from your work that elicits this type of curiosity. It helps me think on a different kind of level, where all the different elements of resistance or force that is working against me to some degree to achieve this higher version of me, actually, where are they? How can I pinpoint them with accuracy to
Uh-huh.
eliminate them and mitigate? When you look back on your career and you reflect on everything that you've accomplished or hope to accomplish, what is it that you hope people, your audience, your community will have extracted from your contributions to society?
Uh, I tried, Jonathan, not to think about that at all. Um, I think that's a question that sort of is asked to the ego, and you know how I feel about the ego. So yeah, I'm just trying to keep going, and keep um, doing stuff that's interesting to me and that I hope is interesting to anybody else. Um, yeah, so yeah, I don't try to think about that at all.
The humility is emanating all the way here to New York.
But I also don't think it's healthy. I would not advise anybody else
Mm,
to think that way either, because you're never going to be right. People are going to think, and who cares what anybody thinks anyway? We're all going to be forgotten before very long.
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for your new work coming out. Could you share a bit about your new and upcoming book?
Thanks for asking. I wish I had it here in front of me. I don't. We've got like 500 boxes. It's a new. It's called the Daily Pressfield, and it's like three times the size of the War of Art. It's like 500 and something pages long, and it's kind of, actually, I got the idea from Ryan Holiday. He from his book The Daily Stoic. He told me, you should write one of these because you've got so much content. And I thought, well, I should write one of these. So what I've tried to do in a 365-day thing is to, um, like, if you were going to start a project, Jonathan, let's say you're going to start to write a book, that you could put the Daily Pressfield down beside your laptop and start at day one, and it will sort of take you through. And a lot of it is about self-sabotage and self-belief and self-doubt and all that kind of thing, resistance and all that kind of stuff. It'll sort of help you through to be a kind of a companion, a 365-day companion. So thanks for asking. Today is what, November 6th, and we hope to bring it out in a week or so. It's just ready to go right now.
Wow, I'm super excited. I know I'm grabbing my copy off Amazon and I'm putting it right next to your other works. Stephen, I've had such an amazing time. This truly is like a level of fulfillment on a personal level, just to be able to sit down, finally talk to you. Like I said, this has been over a year in the making on my end. Um, There's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'm going to pose to you in the time that we have left. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now, assuming he's in that ideal spot, were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
That's a great question. I think just, keep the channel open to the cosmic radio station, keep tuned into that and keep following it as best you can, and try to be a decent person in the rest of your life while you're obsessed with this one thing that you're doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stevn Pressfield, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. It took a year, but we'll do it again. So, I want to give you some praise for talking about inside the inspired, talking about inspiration, because that's what we're all trying to be, and do. So keep up the great work.
Thank you, sir. That means more than I could say coming from you, truly.
And congratulations on running the New York Marathon while you're at it.
Thank you.